In the upcoming prequel series, Blood of My Blood, we are going to get to see the relationship dynamic between Ellen McKenzie and Colum McKenzie play out on screen for us, which is something that was not given a lot of context or screen time in the main series of Outlander. If you've read the books, you have a lot more of an idea of the relationship between these two going into this new prequel series. So let's break down what we know from the books about Colum and Ellen's relationship. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the TV show, please do keep on scrolling. So Colum and Ellen are the two oldest children of Red Jacob McKenzie. And at the beginning of Blood of My Blood, Jacob has just died, and there is now a lot of unease about who is going to become Laird between Colum and Dougal. And because Ellen is the oldest child, she was often shielded from her father from a lot of the unease that surrounds marrying off people of their clan to strengthen alliances and make sure that their family maintains power and gains more. We actually learn the most about their relationship dynamic as young children through a conversation that Claire has in chapter 11 of Outlander with Ned Gowan. In this excerpt here from book 1, we get a pretty good layout of what was going on at the time that Blood of My Blood is going to begin. And in this excerpt, Ned explains to Claire that Colum was only 18 when his father died. And at the time, he had signed a marriage contract with a woman named Letitia in order to strengthen the alliance between the McKenzies and the Camerons. It was about that time that Colum experienced a fall that hurt his legs, and during his recovery, he hurt them again getting out of bed. He was basically bedridden for a year while his wounds healed, and then it was, discovered that they were never going to heal properly, and right at that time is when his father died. So before we meet Colum in Blood of My Blood, he has gone through a lot already. And in this excerpt that continues on, Ned explains how there was a lot of confusion over who would be named the new Laird, but at the end, the brothers stood firm together, and so Colum was named as the next Laird, understanding that Dougal would be the one to be the war chieftain. Now, interestingly, in this excerpt, Ned Gowan kind of lets on declare that a lot of what played out was because of him influencing the decision. But in the most recent panel at Comic-Con, the actors on the show also implied that Ellen is a very important piece of the puzzle in how this all played out, which makes total sense with the added context we get in the books, knowing that she was so close with her father and that he kept her very involved in all of the political aspects of his control of Clan McKenzie and being a laird, and that later on in her life she often would talk to Colum about it a lot and was very close with him as well. Now, of course, that all changed when Colum started to suggest that she be married off to Malcolm Grant in order to strengthen the alliance with their clan, and she wholeheartedly refused, which was the beginning of the end of their relationship, I would say. That's going to be the heart of, I think, their story arc in Blood of My Blood between seasons 1 and 2, but something from the Dragonfly and Amber book that I think is really cool, and I hope that they create a through line with, is this excerpt here, which is when Colum is on his deathbed, essentially speaking to Jaime before the Battle of Culloden. And for Jaime, this is a really important moment because for his whole life, he was being told that Colum and Dougal and his mother had a very strained relationship because of his father marrying his mom and taking her away from them. I'll do a whole separate video breaking down what we know from the books about that moment because there are a lot of details that I hope they include in the show. But what's important about this excerpt here is Colum explaining to Jaime that he wrote to Ellen when Willie died, Jaime's older brother Willie. For Jaime's whole life, he was often compared to his father and mother, and Colum starts off this conversation pointing out that he is very much like his mother, especially with his mouth and how he speaks. And Jaime points out that one of his comments is something that Willie had said to him as a kid, which opens up the door for Colum to tell and essentially confess to Jaime that he had written to his mother when Willie died. He explains to Jaime that after his legs gave out, Ellen was very important to him because she would stop by his room each morning and fill him in on the ongoings within Castle Yock. She'd also stop by at night and tell him about the taxman and the tenants, and his wife Letitia didn't really have an interest in those matters, so it's something that him and Ellen sort of bonded and became close over. In this passage here, he explains that they would sometimes talk with Dougal, but oftentimes they would talk alone, and that Ellen was very well versed in how the money within the clan might be best maintained, and it's very clear that she was a very intelligent woman that he trusted in discussing such matters. And you can tell right here that it hurt him very deeply when she just left, because she left without telling anyone or forewarning. She was just gone, and that seems to be a wound that has not healed inside of Colum at this point in his life, especially given him saying here that he had heard from other people about how she was doing, but nothing directly from Ellen herself. So when he wrote her this letter, Jamie asked if she responded. And unfortunately, he points out that she had a lot going on in her life. Perhaps she meant to respond to him at some point or another, but 12 months later, she was dead. Now, this is the part that makes me really excited because, again, I hope they show some of this in Blood of My Blood somehow. But Colum says that that's when he was surprised to actually hear back from his father, Brian, asking if they could take Jamie in and have him be schooled at Leoch and brought in under Dougal's wing. And that's something that was agreed upon earlier when Ellen and Brian were married, that at some point he would foster with Dougal and then come live at Leoch for a time. And I love that Colum points out here that, sure, those were words that were agreed upon, but oftentimes people do not actually keep their word, and he was surprised that his father did, because at the time he did not know Brian, and we know from other excerpts that Dougal and Colum deeply, deeply loathed him. There's an excerpt from Alec, who works at the stables at Leoch, talking to Claire, saying that the way they talked about him, you would think he was the devil. And of course, Jamie grew up feeling and knowing that. So when he asks him here, what did you think of my father? I think this is a question that for most of his life has probably plagued him, especially given that when we meet Jamie in Outlander, he is now back at Leoch with his uncles, and there's this feeling, no doubt, that he is the product of a very bad situation that they were unhappy with for all of his life, and then they lost Ellen and likely blamed Brian for her not being around, and then them not having any contact with her prior to her death, as Colum just pointed out. He asks Jamie if he means what he was like and reminds him, look in the mirror, because there's so many things that remind him of his father, and that even though it's, his mother's face that he sees, Jamie has the Fraser eyes that in the books are talked about time and time again, and that's the biggest thing that ties him appearance-wise to his dad. And the moment that I think heals something in both Jamie and Colum is when he finally admits to him that even though he didn't like the man very much, and Brian didn't like Colum very much, he always knew him as a man of honor. And that's something that he also identifies Jamie as. And again, you'll remember from season 2 when he consults Jamie's counsel about what he should do in terms of the Battle of Culloden, and if Leoch goes for King James or King Geordie, they have that whole discussion at the tail end of that. And we know how that all plays out on screen, and that shortly thereafter Colum dies. But one thing that the show did not include that I think is really poignant, and if you've read the books, is that they had found his journal or his diary, and in it, one of the last entries he had in it was saying that he met with young Jamie and his wife and has made his peace with Ellen at last. Obviously, the relationship between Ellen and Dougal is much different than Colum and Ellen. I'm curious how they're going to portray that, because there is less to work with in the text and the source material here, but I really do think that their relationship, at least Colum and Ellen's relationship, is one that will be laid out a little bit more clearly on screen, and I'm excited to see that, especially given that at the end of Colum's life he felt it very important to make peace with his sister, and that's a testament to just how close they were. And so I personally am very excited to really see that relationship develop, because it adds so much weight to Colum's character at the end of his life when rewatching the Outlander main series. And again, as a book reader, I think having these little excerpts and nuggets of information just makes the experience of watching the show that much richer. And even though we don't have a book that Blood of My Blood is being translated from, I do hope we have more moments like this that tie back to the main series and the main books.